The alarm screamed through every corridor of Kepler Station. Red lights flashed against the metal walls as thousands of beings ran for their lives. Commander Veltara pressed her forearms against the command center's main console, her insect-like eyes scanning the tactical display. What she saw made her heart sink. 47 enemy ships surrounded the station. The Drakmor Empire had come in force, their black warships forming a perfect circle around Kepler Station like hungry wolves. Around cornered prey, their massive dreadnoughts bristled with weapons, while smaller attack ships darted between them like deadly fish. "Commander, our defense fleet is gone," reported Lieutenant HFY, his crystalline body glowing pale blue with fear. "All 12 ships destroyed in the first wave." Veltara's antennae twitched. 12 good ships and their crews wiped out in minutes. The Drakmor had struck without warning, appearing from fold space like ghosts. No declaration of war, no demands, just death from the void. "What about the distress signal?" she asked. "Broadcasting on all frequencies," said Communications Officer Yule 10, her amphibious skin glistening with nervous sweat. "But the nearest cooperative fleet is 3 weeks away." 3 weeks. They had maybe 3 days before the Drakmor broke through their shields. Veltara looked around the command center at faces from a dozen different worlds. Zephyrians like herself with their compound eyes and quick minds. The crystal-bodied Vorthak, who could interface directly with computer systems. A quarry who could breathe both air and water. A few others from smaller colonies, all of them were about to die. "Incoming transmission," Yulton announced. "It's from the Drakmor flagship." The main screen flickered to life. War Admiral Theknosh appeared, his scaled reptilian face cold as space itself. Battle scars crisscrossed his snout, and his yellow eyes held no mercy. "Kepler Station," his voice rumbled through the speakers. "I am War Admiral Theknosh of the Drakmor Third Fleet. You will surrender immediately and evacuate all personnel to the docking bays. Any resistance will result in the complete destruction of your station." Veltara stepped forward. "This is Commander Veltara. Kepler Station is a civilian facility, under galactic cooperative protection. Your attack violates 17 interstellar treaties." Theknosh laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Treaties are for the weak. You have 72 hours to comply. After that, we will take what we want from your wreckage." The screen went dark. Silence filled the command center. Then Chief Engineer Korthek's crystals chimed softly, breaking the quiet. "Commander, they want the quantum crystal mines. Those deposits power half the cooperative's outer colonies." "How long can our shields hold?" Veltara asked. Korthek's body flashed through several colors as he calculated. "At current bombardment levels, perhaps 4 days. But they're not using full power yet. When they do?" His light dimmed. 2 days. Maybe less. Dr. Silara's webbed hands worked at her medical console. "We have 40,000 civilians on this station. Families, children. The evacuation ships can only hold 8,000. The math was simple and terrible. Most of them would die here. Through the station's thick windows, Veltara could see the Drakmor ships positioning themselves. They moved with practiced precision, like they'd done this many times before. Probably because they had. The Drakmor Empire had been expanding for decades, crushing anyone who stood in their way. "What about fighting back?" asked Security Chief Noxtar, his massive form casting shadows across the room. His species, the Gornaki, were natural warriors. "We have defensive weapons. Against 47 warships?" Veltara shook her head. "We might damage a few, but they'll reduce us to scrap metal." The first energy blast struck the station's shields. The lights flickered, and everyone felt the vibration through the deck plates. Then another blast, and another. The Drakmor weren't waiting. They'd started their bombardment early. "All civilian personnel to inner shelters," Veltara ordered. "Emergency protocols in effect. All off-duty security to the civilian levels. Help with the evacuation." Her crew scattered to their tasks. Veltara remained at her post watching the tactical display. The Drakmor ships fired in rotation, never letting the shields rest. Each blast drained their power reserves a little more. She thought about the distress signal racing through space at light speed. By now it had probably reached the nearest cooperative relay station. Officers somewhere were reading reports, making plans, preparing fleets. But space was vast, and help was far away. In the civilian sectors, families huddled in emergency shelters. Parents held their children close while emergency workers tried to maintain calm. Some cried. Others prayed to whatever gods their species believed in. A few just stared at the walls, waiting for the end. The Aquari children gathered around Dr. Silara's assistant, listening to old stories about heroes from distant worlds. The Vorthak younglings created small light patterns to comfort each other. Zephyrian parents clicked softly to their larvae, ancient songs that spoke of home and safety. But safety was something Kepler Station no longer offered. In engineering, Korthak worked desperately to boost shield strength. His crystalline fingers danced across control surfaces, redirecting power from non-essential systems. Life support, artificial gravity, even the food processors. Everything went to the shields. They could live without hot meals. They couldn't live without protection. From the vacuum of space, how much longer? Asked his assistant, a young Vorthak named Silvera. Unknown, Korthak replied, his body flashing frustrated orange. The Drakmor use focused plasma cannons. Very efficient, very deadly. Our shields were designed to stop asteroids and solar radiation, not military weapons. Another blast shook the station, stronger this time. The Drakmor were increasing their fire rate. On the command deck, Veltara received reports from across the station. Structural damage on levels 12 and 15. Power grid fluctuations in the mining sector. 3 families trapped in a collapsed corridor. The problems multiplied with each enemy salvo. Commander, Yulton called out, I'm picking up something strange on long-range sensors. What kind of strange? Explosions. Big ones. Way out past the system edge. Could be natural phenomena, or maybe ship drives failing. Veltara barely looked up from her damage reports. Probably debris from other battles. The Drakmor have been busy lately. She didn't notice the pattern in those distant explosions, didn't recognize the signature of a ship dropping out of fold space at impossible speeds. The sensors were focused on the immediate threat, not whatever might be happening in the empty darkness beyond. The bombardment continued. Hour after hour, the enemy ships fired their weapons. The station's shields flickered with each impact, growing weaker. Emergency teams rushed from crisis to crisis, fighting fires and sealing hull breaches. As the first day ended, Veltara stood in her quarters, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, help was coming. Ships with good crews and powerful weapons. But they were so far away, and the Drakmor were right here. She pressed one hand against the window. The glass was cold, like the space beyond. Like the future that waited for everyone on Kepler Station. In 2 days, maybe less, those shields would fail. The Drakmor would board the station, taking what they wanted and destroying the rest. Unless something miraculous happened, 40,000 beings would die in the darkness between the stars. Veltara didn't believe in miracles. She believed in duty, in protecting those under her command for as long as possible. Even if that wasn't very long at all. Outside, the enemy ships continued their patient work of destruction. And in the deep void beyond, something howled toward them through the night. War Admiral Teknosh stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bone Crusher, watching Kepler Station burn. Not literally burning, there was no fire in space, but the station's shields flared with each plasma blast like a dying star. Soon, those shields would fail, and he would have another victory to report to the High Command. Status report, he commanded, his clawed hands clasped behind his back. Shields down to 60%. Reported his weapons officer. At current rate of fire, they will collapse in 36 hours. Teknosh nodded. Perfect timing. The Drakmor way was slow, methodical destruction. Let the enemy watch death approaching. Let them feel helpless. Fear made them weaker, more likely to surrender valuable information. Any word from their evacuation? Ships? 8 small transports launched. We destroyed them as ordered. Good. Teknosh's yellow eyes glowed with satisfaction. No one escapes. No one carries word of our presence here. The War Admiral had crushed 43 worlds in his career. Space stations, planetary colonies, even entire star systems. All had fallen to his patient tactics. He would bombard them until their defenses cracked, then send in boarding parties to claim whatever resources remained. Kepler Station would be no different. Inside the dying station, Chief Engineer Korthak worked in the deepest levels of the engineering section. His crystalline body pulsed with stress patterns as he rerouted power from system to system. The shield generators were running beyond safe limits, but safe limits didn't matter anymore. Korthak, his assistant Silvera called out. The primary fusion reactor is showing stress fractures. How long before failure? 18 hours, maybe 20. Korthak's body flashed angry red. The reactor was their heart. Without it, the shields would die instantly. and the Drakmor would punch through the hull like paper. But if he pushed it too hard, it might explode and take half the station with it. Reduce shield strength by 5%, he ordered. Route the saved power to reactor cooling. It bought them time. Not much, but every minute mattered. 3 levels up, Dr. Silara moved through the medical bay like a ghost. Her amphibious features were pale with exhaustion. She'd been working for 20 hours straight, treating injured civilians and preparing for the casualties that would come when the shields failed. A young Zephyrian larva sat on one of the medical beds, its tiny arms wrapped around a stuffed animal from Earth. The toy was old and worn, a gift from some human trader years ago. The child didn't understand what was happening, only that the adults were scared. Will the monsters hurt us? The larva asked in its chirping voice. Silara knelt beside the bed, her webbed hands gentle. The grown-ups won't let that happen. It was a lie. When the Drakmor came, there would be no protection, but the child needed hope, even if hope was false. In the command center, Commander Veltara studied enemy fleet positions. The Drakmor had formed a perfect sphere around the station, their ships spaced precisely to prevent any escape. They'd done this before, many times. Commander, called Lieutenant HFY. I've been analyzing their attack patterns. They're following standard siege protocol. Systematic bombardment until structural collapse. How standard? Very. The Drakmor Military Academy probably teaches this exact formation. HFY's crystalline form dimmed with worry. I've seen records of their previous conquests. They always use the same tactics. Veltara's antennae twitched thoughtfully. Always? Yes. Same ship positions, same firing patterns, same timing. They're very predictable. Predictable can be useful, but useful for what? Her tiny remaining defense force couldn't fight 47 warships. Even if she knew exactly what the enemy would do next, knowledge without power meant nothing. The station shuddered under another barrage. Emergency lights flickered in the corridors as power fluctuations rippled through the electrical grid. In the civilian shelters, people held each other tighter. Communications Officer Yulten looked up from her console. Commander, those sensor readings from the system edge are getting stronger. What kind of readings? Hard to tell. The interference from the bombardment is scrambling long-range sensors, but it looks like fold space distortions, big ones. Veltara frowned. Fold space was how ships traveled faster than light, creating temporary tunnels through higher dimensions. But the distortions Yulten was detecting were massive, far larger than any normal ship should produce. Natural phenomena. Maybe. Or... Yulten hesitated. The computer suggests it might be a very large ship or multiple ships traveling at extremely high velocity. How high? Higher than safety regulations allow. Much higher. Every species in the Galactic Cooperative followed strict rules about fold space travel. Enter too fast and the stresses could tear a ship apart. Exit too close to a gravity well and you risked catastrophic collision. The math was well understood, and the safety margins were generous. Could be a cooperative fleet, Veltara mused. Maybe they're pushing their engines to reach us faster. But even as she said it, she didn't quite believe it. Cooperative commanders were careful, methodical. They followed procedures and protocols. None of them would risk their ships and crews with reckless fold space maneuvers. On the Bone Crusher, Theknosh received similar sensor reports from his science officer. The Drakmor had detected the fold space anomalies hours ago, but dismissed them as irrelevant. Probably stellar activity, the science officer suggested. Or perhaps debris from battles in adjacent systems. How long until the station's shields fail? 32 hours at current bombardment rate. Continue the attack. Ignore the sensor ghosts. It was a decision that would haunt Theknosh for the rest of his very short remaining life. Deep in Kepler, station civilian sections, Managing Director Hunpa coordinated evacuation efforts. His people, mostly office workers and their families, helped load emergency supplies and organize shelter assignments. It was busy work, keeping minds occupied while death circled overhead. Director, called one of his assistants. The children want to know if help is coming. Hunpa looked at the sea of young faces around him. Dozens of species, all looking to him for answers he didn't have. The Galactic Cooperative was vast and powerful, but space was vaster. Help might be coming, but it wouldn't arrive in time. Yes, he said finally. Help is coming. Another lie, but sometimes lies were kinder than truth. Back in the command center, the sensor readings were getting stronger. Whatever was causing the fold space distortions was moving fast, heading directly toward their system. Too fast for safety, too fast for sanity. Time to arrival? Veltara asked. Yulton worked at her calculations. If these readings are accurate, and if it's actually a ship, 14 hours. 14 hours. The station's shields would fail in 32. If help was coming, it would arrive to find wreckage and corpses floating in space. Send a message, Veltara ordered. All frequencies, maximum power. Tell whoever's coming that they're flying into a war zone. 47 Drakmor ships fully, armed and hostile. The message burst from Kepler Station's transmitters racing across space at light speed. But the approaching ship, if it was a ship, was still in fold space, isolated from normal communications. The warning would arrive too late to do any good. As the station's second day under siege began, the bombardment intensified. The Drakmor had grown impatient with their slow progress. More ships joined the attack, focusing their fire on key shield generators. In engineering, alarms screamed as systems failed one by one. Korthak and his team raced to repair what they could, but they were fighting a losing battle. The station was dying around them, one circuit at a time. "Korthak!" Silvera shouted over the noise. "The main shield generator is overloading." "Shut it down. Switch to backup power. Backup is already at maximum." The shields flickered and dimmed. For a moment, the station was completely defenseless. Then the backup systems engaged. But they were weaker, much weaker. On his flagship, Teknosh smiled as he watched the enemy shields falter. "Increase bombardment rate. Target their power stations. I want this finished within 18 hours. The Drakmor ships obeyed, their weapons glowing brighter, as they poured destruction into Kepler Station. The end was approaching fast. But in the void beyond, something else was approaching faster. Captain Elena Vasquez gripped her command chair as the TFS Retribution screamed through fold space at velocities that would have terrified any sane commander. The ship groaned around her, metal and composites stressed beyond their design limits. Red warning lights bathed the bridge in hellish light. "Captain," called her first officer, Commander Jackson Hayes, "we're pushing the engines at 130% capacity. Any higher and we risk catastrophic failure." "Noted," Elena replied, her dark eyes fixed on the tactical display. "Athena, time to emergence." The ship's artificial intelligence responded immediately, her synthetic voice calm despite the chaos. 4 hours, 23 minutes to combat emergence, Captain. Current probability of successful fold space exit, 27%. Elena nodded. 27% wasn't great odds, but it was better than the odds facing Kepler Station. She'd read the distress signal, seen the tactical analysis. 47 Drakmor warships against a mining station. It would be a massacre unless someone intervened. The Terran Defense Force had protocols for situations like this. Contact High Command. Request orders. Assemble a proper fleet response. Follow the chain of command. Do everything by the book. Elena had thrown the book out the airlock 6 days ago. "Chief Torres," she called to her engineering officer. "How are our systems holding up?" Chief Petty Officer Maria Torres looked up from her console, her weathered face grim. "Fusion reactors are running hot but stable. Inertial dampeners are at maximum, but we're still pulling 8 Gs. Life support is creative. We're recycling everything, including the coffee." A few chuckles echoed around the bridge. Trust a human crew to joke about death while racing toward impossible odds. Elena had commanded the Retribution for 3 years. She knew every bolt and wire in the ship, knew her crew like family. They were good people, all volunteers who'd signed up to protect others. When they'd intercepted Kepler Station's distress call, the vote had been unanimous. Go help. The fact that they'd be violating direct orders didn't matter. The fact that they'd probably die didn't matter. 40,000 civilians were about to be slaughtered, and the Retribution was the only ship close enough to help. "Captain," Hayes said quietly, "we could still turn back. Send the distress signal to High Command, let them handle it." Elena looked at him. Hayes was a good officer, played everything by regulations, but he'd also voted to proceed with the rescue mission. "You know those people will be dead before any official response arrives," she said. "Yes, ma'am. But we're one ship against 47. The math isn't in our favor." Since when do humans care about math? It was an old joke in the Terran Defense Force. Other species calculated odds, analyzed probabilities, made logical decisions based on available data. Humans looked at impossible situations and asked, "Yeah, but what if we try anyway?" Dr. Sarah Kim, the ship's medical officer, spoke from her station near the back of the bridge. Captain, I should mention that prolonged exposure to these G-forces could cause brain hemorrhages, organ failure, and structural damage to skeletal systems. Noted, Doc. How long can we maintain current acceleration? Medically speaking, we passed the safe limit 4 days ago. Dr. Kim shrugged. But humans have survived worse. Probably. The bridge shook as another fold space fluctuation rippled through the ship's structure. Outside the reinforced windows, twisted space-time created impossible colors and shapes. Most species found fold space terrifying. Humans had learned to navigate it the way their ancestors had sailed Earth's oceans, with skill, courage, and a healthy disrespect for the dangers involved. Athena, Elena called. Run final combat calculations. Assume we emerge at current velocity. Calculating, Captain. A pause. Warning. Emergence at current speed violates all established tactical doctrines. Recommended procedure is to reduce velocity to 0.05 c before engaging enemy forces. We don't have time for recommended procedures. Understood. Computing alternative attack vectors. Another pause. Captain, I should note that our approach violates the fundamental principles of space warfare as understood by all known species. Good. That means they won't see it coming. The Retribution was a heavy cruiser designed for long-range patrol and system defense. She carried a crew of 800, armed with particle beam cannons, mass drivers, and enough nuclear warheads to crack a small moon. Against 47 enemy ships, she was outgunned and outnumbered, but she had advantages no alien commander would understand. Human ships were built differently from those of other species. Where aliens designed for efficiency and elegance, humans designed for survival. Every system had backups. Every critical component was redundant. Damage that would cripple other vessels might just make a human ship angry. Human tactics were different, too. Other species fought at long range, maneuvering carefully to avoid damage. Humans closed to knife-fighting distance and slugged it out until one side was scrap metal. It wasn't pretty, but it worked. Lieutenant Morrison, Elena called to her weapons officer. Status on the mass drivers? Loaded and ready, Captain. We've got depleted uranium slugs in tubes 1 through 8, high explosive in 9 through 12. Set them for maximum velocity. I want those slugs moving at significant fractions of light speed. Aye, Captain. But ma'am, firing at those velocities, while we're moving this fast, the targeting computers will have microseconds to calculate firing solutions. Elena smiled grimly. Then we'd better not miss. The ship's intercom crackled to life. All hands, this is the captain. We're about to drop out of fold space directly into a combat zone. 47 hostile ships, unknown defensive capabilities. Our job is simple. Protect Kepler Station and its 40,000 civilians. She paused, looking around the bridge at faces she'd known for years. Good people. Brave people. People who'd volunteered for what amounted to a suicide mission. I won't lie to you, she continued. The odds aren't good. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and flying into a situation that would make any rational species turn around and go home. But we're not any rational species. We're humans. And humans don't abandon people in need. Through the ship, 800 crew members listened to their captain's words. In engineering, they pushed the fusion reactors beyond safe limits. In weapons control, they loaded the mass drivers with rounds that could punch through battleship armor. In medical, they prepared for casualties. None of them questioned the mission. None of them suggested retreat. They were Terran Defense Force, and their motto was simple. We leave no one behind. Athena, Elena said, begin emergence sequence. Captain, I feel compelled to remind you that our survival probability remains at 23%. What's the survival probability for Kepler Station if we don't intervene? 0%. Then 23% is infinitely better. Begin emergence. The fold space tunnel around them began to collapse as the Retribution prepared to return to normal space. Through the shifting colors of higher dimensions, Elena could see the faint glow of distant stars. Somewhere ahead waited Kepler Station and 40,000 people who didn't know help was coming. Emergence in 30 seconds, Athena announced. All systems report ready. Weapons charged, shields at maximum, damage control team standing by. Elena leaned forward in her chair. Remember, people, we're not here to win a glorious victory. We're here to buy time for those civilians. Every second we keep the enemy busy is another second for them to live. 10 seconds to emergence. The ship shuddered as fold space began to release its grip. 5 seconds. Elena's hands tightened on her chair arms. Emergence in 3, 2, 1. The Retribution burst back into normal space-time like a bullet from a gun. She was traveling at nearly 15% the speed of light, moving faster than any warship in galactic history had ever moved while engaging enemy forces. On Kepler Station, Yulton's sensors screamed as they detected the impossible. A ship, emerging from fold space at combat velocity, heading directly toward the Drakmor fleet. "Commander," she shouted, "I'm reading a massive fold space emergence. Single ship unknown configuration, velocity." She paused, checking her readings twice. Velocity 0.15 C and climbing. Commander Veltara stared at the tactical display. No ship could maintain structural integrity at those speeds. It was physically impossible, unless the ship was human. "What's their heading?" "Direct intercept with the Drakmor flagship. Time to contact." Yulton's voice dropped to a whisper. 18 minutes. 18 minutes until a single human warship collided with an entire enemy fleet. It would be the shortest space battle in galactic history, or the most spectacular. War Admiral Teknosh stared at his tactical display in disbelief. A single ship was racing toward his fleet at impossible speeds, its fusion engines blazing like a small star. The vessel's energy signature was unlike anything in his databases. "Science. Officer," he barked, "what am I looking at?" "Unknown vessel, Admiral. Configuration suggests Terran origin, but no Terran ship has ever operated at such velocities. Current speed is beyond safe operational parameters." Teknosh's yellow eyes narrowed. He'd heard stories about the humans, the newest members of the Galactic Cooperative. Primitive warriors from a backward world, according to most reports. Their ships were crude, their tactics unrefined. They posed no threat to a properly organized Drakmor fleet. "How long until intercept?" 15 minutes, Admiral. Dispatch the Bloodfang and Skull Crusher to deal with it. 2 destroyers should be sufficient for 1 small ship. It was the last mistake Teknosh would ever make. On the Retribution, Captain Elena Vasquez watched the 2 Drakmor destroyers break formation and accelerate toward her ship. They moved with the confidence of predators who'd never encountered anything they couldn't kill. "Captain," Commander Hayes reported, "enemy destroyers approaching. Range 4 million kilometers and closing. Their weapons? Standard Drakmor loadout. Plasma cannons, photon torpedoes, particle beams. Effective range approximately 50,000 kilometers." Elena smiled coldly. "And our effective range? Mass. Drivers can engage at current distance, ma'am. Particle beams effective at 200,000 kilometers. Then we outrange them by a considerable margin." She keyed the ship-wide intercom. "All hands stand by for combat acceleration. This is going to get rough." The Retribution didn't slow down. Instead, she increased speed, her fusion engines pushing her toward the enemy at velocities that defied common sense. Her mass drivers swiveled toward the approaching destroyers, targeting computers calculating firing solutions at impossible speeds. "Firing solution locked," reported Lieutenant Morrison from Weapons Control. "Fire." 8 depleted uranium slugs, launched from the Retribution's mass drivers, accelerated to significant fractions of light speed by magnetic coils. The slugs were each the size of a telephone pole and moving fast enough to penetrate any known armor. The first Drakmor destroyer, Bloodfang, had 3 seconds to register the incoming projectiles before they arrived. The ship's commander didn't even have time to order evasive maneuvers. 4 slugs punched through his vessel's shields like they weren't there, tearing through armor plating, bulkheads, and vital systems. Bloodfang exploded in a ball of superheated plasma, its reactor containment failing catastrophically. The explosion was visible from Kepler Station, a brief new star that flared and died in the space between worlds. The second destroyer, Skull Crusher, managed to alter course slightly. 3 of the remaining 4 slugs missed, but the 4th struck the ship's port side, shearing off weapon nacelles and life support systems. The destroyer tumbled helplessly, atmosphere venting from dozens of hull breaches. 2 destroyers neutralized, Morrison reported with professional calm. "Time to main fleet 11 minutes. Elena nodded. "Athena, begin combat approach pattern Delta 7. "Captain," the AI replied, "pattern Delta 7 has never been attempted at current velocities. The G-forces involved may exceed human tolerance." "Then, we'd better hold on tight." The Retribution began a series of wild maneuvers that would have torn apart any other ship. She rolled, dove, and spiraled through space like a fighter craft instead of a heavy cruiser. Her inertial dampeners screamed in protest, but they held. On Kepler Station, Commander Veltara watched the impossible display. "How fast is that ship? Moving. Still accelerating," Yulton reported, her voice filled with awe. "They're up to 0.17 C now. And they're They're dancing through space. I've never seen anything like it. The human ship moved like something alive, weaving between space debris and asteroids with fluid grace. Its course corrections were so rapid and precise that tracking systems struggled to follow. War Admiral Theknosh felt the first touch of fear as he watched his destroyers die. All ships form defensive sphere formation. Concentrate fire on the human vessel when it enters range. Admiral, his tactical officer said, the human ship will arrive in 8 minutes. But sir, they're not slowing down, they have to slow down. No ship can engage in combat at those speeds. But the Retribution had no intention of slowing down. Captain Vasquez was attempting something no sane commander would try. A high-speed attack run through the heart of the enemy formation. Range, to target 500,000 kilometers, Morrison announced. Particle beams coming online. The Retribution's main weapons were particle beam cannons, designed to strip electrons from atoms and fire the resulting plasma at near light speed. At close range, they could melt through battleship armor. At the speed the human ship was traveling, they became something close to death rays. Target the enemy flagship, Elena ordered. All weapons, continuous fire. The Retribution opened up with everything she had. Particle beams lanced out from her weapon batteries, striking Drakmor ships with surgical precision. Mass driver slugs followed, punching through shields and armor like bullets through paper. Nuclear warheads detonated in perfect formation, each explosion timed to maximum effect. The Drakmor fleet returned fire, but their weapons couldn't track a target moving at 17% of light speed. Plasma bolts and photon torpedoes chased the human ship through space, always arriving where she'd been instead of where she was. Direct hit on enemy cruiser Bone Grinder, Morrison reported. She's breaking up. Another hit on the battleship. Death's Edge. Her shields are down. Elena felt the ship shudder as a Drakmor plasma bolt scored a glancing hit. Damage report. Minor hull damage on Deck 7, came the reply from Chief Torres. Armor held. We're still at full combat effectiveness. The Retribution dove through the Drakmor formation like an avenging angel, her weapons blazing. She was too fast to target effectively, too maneuverable to trap, and too well armored to stop. Every second of her attack run left another enemy ship damaged or destroyed. My God, whispered Commander Hayes, watching the tactical display. We're actually doing it. But Captain Vasquez knew better. They were buying time, nothing more. The Retribution was tough, but she wasn't invincible. Eventually, the Drakmor would land enough hits to slow her down. When that happened, 47 ships would focus their fire on one target. Athena, she called. How much longer can we maintain this attack pattern? Unknown, Captain. We are operating beyond all established parameters. An explosion rocked the ship as a photon torpedo found its mark. Warning lights flashed as systems failed throughout the vessel. Direct hit starboard side, Torres reported. We've lost mass driver 4 and particle beam battery 2. Hull breaches on decks 9 through 11. The Retribution was bleeding atmosphere and energy, but she kept fighting. Her remaining weapons continued their deadly work, carving through the enemy formation like a sword through silk. On his flagship, Theknosh watched his fleet die around him. Ships that had conquered dozens of worlds were exploding like toys. The human vessel moved through his formations like a force of nature, unstoppable and terrifying. All ships, he broadcast on the fleet frequency. Concentrate fire on the human ship. Everything we have. 43 surviving Drakmor warships turned their weapons toward the Retribution. Space filled with energy beams, plasma bolts, and photon torpedoes, all aimed at one small human cruiser racing through their midst. Incoming fire, Hayes announced unnecessarily. Everyone could see the light show converging on their position. Evasive maneuvers, Elena ordered. All available power to shields. The Retribution twisted through space, dodging what she could and absorbing what she couldn't. Her shields flared and sparked as enemy fire found its mark. Armor plates glowed white-hot under the concentrated bombardment. Shields down to 30%, Torres called out. We can't take much more of this. Elena gripped her command chair as another explosion shook the ship. Around her, bridge stations sparked and went dark. The smell of burning electronics filled the air. They were one ship against 43. The math was finally catching up with them. But they'd bought Kepler Station precious time. Every second the Drakmor spent fighting the Retribution was another second the civilians lived. All weapons, Elena ordered. Continuous fire until the barrels melt. Show these bastards what humans do when cornered. The Retribution screamed, through space, her engines howling like something from the depths of hell itself. She was dying, but she was taking the enemy with her, one ship at a time. The retribution carved through the heart of the Drakmor fleet like a meteor of death and fire. Her hull glowed white-hot from accumulated hits, atmosphere venting from dozens of breaches. But her weapons never stopped firing. "Captain, Chief," Torres called from her station. "Fusion Reactor 3 is offline. We're running on backup power." Captain Elena Vasquez felt blood trickling down her forehead from a head wound. The bridge was a chaos of sparking consoles and emergency lighting. Half her crew was injured, but they stayed at their posts. "How many enemy ships left?" she asked. 16. Lieutenant Morrison replied, his voice hoarse from smoke inhalation. "But Captain, we're not going to last much longer." Elena knew he was right. The retribution had been designed to survive, but no ship could take this kind of punishment. Forever. They'd destroyed or disabled 31 Drakmor vessels in 20 minutes of combat. A feat that would be talked about for generations. But physics was physics, and they were dying. "Athena," she called to the ship's AI. "Damage assessment. Catastrophic damage to hull sections 7 through 15. The synthetic voice replied, calm as always. 73% of weapons, systems offline. Life support failing on multiple decks. Estimate total structural failure in 6 minutes, 27 seconds. 6 minutes. Elena looked around the bridge at her crew. They were still fighting, still trying to protect people they'd never met. That was what made humans different from every other species in the galaxy. They didn't calculate odds when lives were at stake. "All remaining ships," came the voice of War Admiral Teknosh over the communication channels. "Destroy that vessel. I want every weapon firing until nothing remains but atoms." The surviving Drakmor warships closed in like vultures, their weapons glowing with deadly intent. The retribution was trapped in the center of a tightening circle, unable to escape. Too damaged to fight much longer, but Elena wasn't ready to give up. "Torres," she called, "how much power can you give me from the remaining reactors?" "Captain, if I push them any harder, they'll explode. That's the idea. Route everything, and I mean everything, to the main particle beam array. Life support, artificial gravity, inertial dampeners, everything." Torres stared at her. "Ma'am, that will kill us. We're dead anyway, but maybe we can take their flagship with us." Understanding dawned on the chief's weathered face. She nodded grimly and began rerouting power systems. "Aye, Captain. All power to main weapons." The retribution began to die around them. Life support failed, leaving them breathing recycled air. Artificial gravity cut out, leaving everyone floating in their restraints. The inertial dampeners went offline, meaning every movement of the ship would crush them with G-forces. But the main particle beam array blazed with power like a small sun. On Kepler Station, Commander Veltara watched the impossible battle through her sensors. The human ship was clearly dying, venting atmosphere and debris. But it wasn't retreating. It wasn't surrendering. It was gathering power for one final attack. "What are they doing?" she whispered. "I think," said Lieutenant Keshwa, his crystalline body flashing with amazement, "they're going to ram the enemy flagship." War Admiral Teknosh saw the human ship turning toward him, its remaining weapons charging for a final shot. His tactical officer was screaming damage reports, but Teknosh barely heard them. 31 ships of his fleet were gone. 31 ships destroyed by a single human vessel that should have been crushed in the first minutes of combat. How was this possible? "All weapons, fire on my command," he ordered. "When I give the word, hit that ship with everything we have." But before he could give the order, the retribution fired. The particle beam that lanced from her main array was the most powerful weapon discharge ever recorded in galactic history. Every erg of power from her fusion reactors, every joule of energy from her capacitor banks, focused into a single devastating blast. The beam struck the Drakmor flagship Bone Crusher at the moment Elena Vasquez whispered, "For Kepler Station." Teknosh's ship didn't just explode. It disintegrated. The particle beam cut through her shields, armor, and hull like they were made of tissue paper. The flagship's reactor core destabilized, creating a chain reaction that lit up the void like a newborn star. The explosion took out 3 more Drakmor ships that were too close to escape the blast. Suddenly, the mighty fleet that had terrorized Kepler Station was reduced to 12 damaged vessels, and 1 very dead war admiral. The retribution tumbled through space, her engines dead, her hull cracked like an eggshell. But she'd done what she came to do. "Captain," Hayes called weakly, "the remaining Drakmor ships are retreating." Elena tried to smile, but her vision was going dark. The G-forces from their final maneuver had been crushing. She could taste blood in her mouth and feel her consciousness slipping away. Good, she managed to whisper. The civilians, are they safe? Yes, ma'am. Kepler Station is secure. Elena Vasquez, captain of the TFS Retribution, closed her eyes and let the darkness take her. The rescue ships from Kepler Station found the human cruiser drifting in space 12 hours later. Her hull was a mass of twisted metal and composite armor, barely recognizable as a starship. Atmosphere leaked from hundreds of breaches, and her fusion reactors had gone cold. Commander Veltara led the rescue operation personally. She'd never seen anything like the Retribution, a ship designed for war in the most brutal sense. Everything about her spoke of sacrifice, of crews willing to die to protect others. How many survivors? She asked Dr. Silara as they moved through the human ship's corridors. 537, the Aquari medic replied. 263 dead, most killed during the final attack run. They found Captain Vasquez in the ship's medical bay, unconscious but alive. Dr. Sarah Kim, the human medical officer, was working frantically to keep her captain breathing with equipment that barely functioned. She'll live, Dr. Kim said when she saw Veltara. Severe concussion, 3 broken ribs, internal bleeding, but she's tough. Humans are hard to kill. Over the following days, as the Retribution's crew recovered in Kepler Station's medical facilities, the full scope of their sacrifice became clear. They'd violated direct orders, traveled 6 days at dangerous speeds, and fought impossible odds to save people they'd never met. Why? Veltara asked Elena when the human captain was finally conscious. Why risk everything for strangers? Elena looked at her with eyes that held depths the alien commander couldn't fully understand. Because they needed help, and we were the only ones close enough to provide it. But the odds didn't matter. When someone calls for help, you go. That's what humans do. 3 days later, the official Galactic Cooperative Response Fleet arrived to find Kepler Station intact and the Drakmor threat eliminated. Admiral Chen of the TDF Yamato read Captain Vasquez's report with a mixture of pride and exasperation. Captain, he said during their private meeting, you violated approximately 47 different regulations in the course of this mission. Yes, sir. You risked your ship and crew on an unauthorized rescue operation. Yes, sir. And you engaged a superior enemy force with tactics that any reasonable commander would call suicidal. Elena met his gaze steadily. Yes, sir. Admiral Chen was quiet for a long moment. Then he smiled. Outstanding work, Captain. The Terran Defense Force is recommending you for the Star of Valor. Your crew will receive commendations, and the Retribution will be rebuilt stronger than ever. But the real reward came later, when Elena visited the civilian sections of Kepler Station. Thousands of beings from dozens of worlds came to see the human who'd saved them. Zephyrian children clicked songs in her honor. Vorthak artisans created crystal sculptures depicting her ship. Aquari poets composed epics about the battle. A young Zephyrian larva, the same one who'd asked Dr. Silara about monsters, approached Elena with something in its tiny hands. It was the stuffed animal from Earth, the toy some human trader had given years ago. Thank you, the child chirped in its musical voice, offering Elena the toy. Elena knelt down and gently pushed the toy back toward the child. You keep it, she said, and remember, when you're in trouble, when you need help, just call. Humans will come. The child looked up at her with compound eyes that reflected wonder and trust. Promise? Elena smiled, thinking of her crew, her ship, and the long tradition of humans who'd always answered the call for help no matter the cost. Promise. Word of the Battle of Kepler Station spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. The story grew in the telling. One human ship against an entire fleet. Impossible odds overcome through courage and sacrifice. Other species began to understand that humanity brought something new to the Galactic Cooperative. They brought hope. In the months that followed, whenever distress calls echoed through space, the response was always the same. Human ships would come howling out of the void, their crews ready to face any danger to protect the innocent. Because that's what humans did. They left no one behind.